at 26238 Ryan Road, Warren, Michigan. Mr. Probert is 66 years old, born on January the 20th, 1944. Mr. Probert currently resides at 28832 Kaufman, Roseville, Michigan. My name is Dave Brousseau, and I will be the interviewer, and Gary Miglia will be the videographer. Mr. Probert, would you state for the record the branch of service you served?
I was in the United States Air Force from October 2nd, 1964 to October 1st, 1968.
All right, let's go back to high school and give us a little bit of information about how you got into the service and a little bit about your family and what was going on prior to your enlistment.
Okay. I went to Warren Lincoln High School in Michigan, and after I graduated from there I went to South Macomb Community College for a semester, and then I transferred to Oakland University. And unfortunately, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, so I was there about 3 semesters, transferred to Eastern Michigan to play football, and found out I had a bad knee, broke up my girlfriend, and said, I've got to do something different with my life. So I went down to the Navy recruiter at Grosse Field to take a test to become a navigator, and passed the first part of the test. Second part, you had to have a 3 on. I got a 2 on. The guy said you can take it again in 6 months. So the next day, I had always decided that I owed this country something for living here. So I went down and I joined the Air Force the next morning. I'm not sure
What
how
made
well
you choose the Air Force? Was there something about it that...
Well, the main thing was my dad was in World War II, and he was a ground pounder. He was in the Army. And when we were growing up, he, just before I had enlisted, he said, if you join the Army or the Marines, I'll disown you. Because they had a really rough time, and he didn't want to see us go through that. So those are my reasons for going to the Navy and then to the Air Force.
Was there anything about the Air Force that kind of tweaked your interest in terms of...
I always felt that they were not slighting anybody else, but I always thought they were a little bit better educated. That was the Navy and the Air Force, but that was one of the reasons that I went for it.
Now, how old would you be at that point? Just out of high school, or
No,
a year or so out?
I would have been probably about 20.
20. What was going on around you in the world at that time?
Well, I
effects
graduated in 1962. I didn't join the Air Force until '64. President Kennedy was already assassinated on November 22nd of '63. And I think that was another thing that, you know, that's not what your country can do for you, but what you can do. And I think that, plus the fact, the other things that were happening, like I said, I always felt I owed the country something for living here at the time, so I joined.
Were you in tune with what was going on in Vietnam at the time?
To a degree, but it wasn't until after I got in that I saw it from a different viewpoint. And I could empathize with the protesters, but at the same time, we were there to do a job, you know, and help protect this country.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the things that actually got me involved. I did develop some questions about how things were being handled. You had, what's her name, Jane you know, to the soldiers, not necessarily the upper brass or anybody else, as much as to the soldiers who were fighting the war. We all go for one reason or another, but if you were patriotic. But it's things like that that made me question what was going on here. Where was it? Quezon. They kept reinforcing, and it just didn't strike me right that these guys were dying, you know, in Vietnam, and it seemed like they didn't make enough effort to try to win that battle, you know, and I had questions myself after I, you know, got so far into this thing, but I always respected the servicemen. And pretty much I trusted most of the military leaders at the time. Politicians is another question.
Were some of your friends enlisting at that time also?
Well, most of my friends at that time were in college. I know a couple of them from high school got exemptions. There are two people that I knew from Warren. One was playing football on the junior varsity behind me, Russ Chase. He was killed in Vietnam. Larry Thompson's brother Neil, who lived down the street from us, Larry was my age. Brother was a little younger. He got killed in Vietnam. And I had a friend in the Air Force, Wally Dart, who was also killed. So it's one of those things when I went to see the moving wall that they had in Mount Clemens. I got the information off the computers where their names were located on the wall. And as I walked away, I never expected anything like that, but I started crying. When you start realizing how young these people were,
Oh, yeah.
and they were good people.
That's not unusual.
Yeah, but it surprised me. I was not used to crying very often.
It's not unusual to have that kind of an emotion pent up, and you're not aware of it until something pops up that brings it to the surface.
Yeah.
What was your first assignment? Where did you go for boot?
Well, I went to Lackland. They had decreased the basic training requirement to 6 weeks. So instead of going for 8, I decided I'd opt for the 6. But when I went in out of college, I was 165 pounds. I was in good shape. Sort of like to see those days again, but I sort of laughed my way through Air Force basic training. And after, the one story that I got you might like is that we had a lieutenant that was in charge of our training squadron, but we'd never met him. So I had 2 sergeants. One was the hard butt, and the other was an Indian. He was pretty much drunk when he wasn't working. But I was on guard duty. I was a squad leader, and one of my guys was sick. So the lieutenant came up to the door and wanted to come in. Well, we were told not to admit anybody unless, you know, we knew who they were. So he started screaming at me because I wouldn't let him in the barracks. And the 2 TIs came out of the day room, and they had vouched for him, came in, started questioning me on all my security regulations and everything. He came in ticked off, and he left ticked off because I covered everything, you know. But that was my story out of basic. Then I went to tech school in Amarillo, and
So this was 6 weeks?
yeah, it was 6 weeks in basic.
What
And
went on in basic? Anything unusual, or?
Well, basically, your push-ups, jumping jacks, all the good stuff, running, the obstacle course, all the standard stuff that you would have. But it was I don't want to say Mickey Mouse, because it was rough for a lot of guys, but when I was in shape, I didn't have any problem with it. So,
Did they put you through some kind of testing to find out what your application was?
well, yeah, you had the game plan, general, admin, mechanics, and electronics they got for you went in. Then they had you go into personnel and apply for different things in whichever one of those 4 career areas you wanted to go into. So I went in to talk to the guy. I said, what are you doing here? He said, personnel work. I said, okay, put that down if you would. And that's what I got. Wound up getting personnel work. I did.
Test out of anything else?
Well, they gave you a radio operator's test. I had a language aptitude test. And on the language aptitude test, the guy said it was the highest score he'd ever seen. And I said, well, why didn't I get language school when I went back in to see him the second time? He said, because somebody did you a favor. The only language school they've got available is Vietnamese. So, I said, okay, it's fine with me. But that was, basically those are the other testing. You had the standard military classes to go through. But other than that.
So you chose personnel.
Yeah, that's where I wound up.
Is that what determined to send you to Texas?
Well, the school for training for personnel was in Texas. And I can't tell you the one story. But anyway, that was 5 months up in Amarillo. And while I was there, I went out with the Amarillo skydivers one day. I checked to see if it was okay, and so as long as you don't damage your body, the military owns it, you know, that's what they're telling me. So I went out and I made a jump from 3,500 feet, busted my butt, and everybody else went down the one way because they put out a streamer. It was a Cessna 180. You had 3 divers and a pilot. Now, this is strictly off the military scale. This was with a private skydiving club. Well, when I went out, I was the first one out, and I wound up getting blown under the plane instead of away from it where you're supposed to go. I wound up about 3 to 5 miles away. I still don't know. And I landed in a pasture, busted up my butt pretty good, and they came out to get me with a pickup truck. Took us back, and we went into town and watched the movie Goldfinger, where they're jumping out of planes again. But that was my interesting story for Amarillo. And after Amarillo, I wound up going to Keesler in Mississippi.
Okay, now why would you go there? What was the purpose?
I finished the tech school for personnel. That was my first permanent party base, was Keesler. And on the dream sheet, when they ask you where you want to go, I put down, for overseas, I put down England. For stateside, I didn't know where I wanted to go, so I said, put down Michigan. Well, they gave me MI, sent me to Mississippi. It's the way the military operates anyway. But I spent I spent 6 weeks in San Antonio, about 5 months in Amarillo. Wait a minute, that was...
Must have been me.
How's that? That's better. Anyway.
Turn on automatically.
5 months in Amarillo. I left on St. Patrick's Day, came home for a slight vacation and see my parents, and then I went to Biloxi, Mississippi for 19 months. I was there.
And what was your purpose in Biloxi?
Well, I was permanent party. I worked with Airmen's Records. Once in a while, I'd help out with officers' records if they, you know, short of people or something. We had a civilian woman who worked with most of that.
When you were enlisting, what was your folks' reaction to that?
Well, my mom wasn't happy when I was skydiving But on the other hand, I think they were proud of me, but at the same time, you know, my dad got ticked when a friend of mine was going to Tan Son Nhut, Vietnam, when I was at Keesler. So I tried to put in for it so we still remain roommates, right? I put in for Vietnam and I called home, and my dad said some words that weren't very nice. Called me politely a butthead to start with, because he wasn't very happy with war situations, and you don't want to see anything bad happen to your kids. So anyway, I said, look, Pa, they're all coming down for Vietnam. I was in personnel, I could see it all happening. So I talked to my buddies to put in for Vietnam with me, and the one guy went to the Philippines for 19 months, the other one went to Thailand for 16 months, and I got the worst one, the isolated tour to Taiwan for 13 months because they were building the base from scratch.
Now, this is subsequent to your Biloxi visit.
Right.
Okay. And your mom, what did she say about all this?
She didn't have much choice. The only thing that was, don't do that again when I was skydiving. So that was, the rest of it,
Apparently you had a need to tell them everything, huh?
yeah, well, I didn't. No, I sent a letter home to my brother
Oh.
and one to my parents. He read the letter out loud to my parents. And that's the fastest letter I ever got back. Waiting for mail call and you get one like that, you know?
So after Biloxi is now into your routine job,
Yeah, that was, I used
what
to,
brought on the transfer now to,
well, that was a routine thing. After being stateside for so long, everybody was
rotated?
rotating somewhere. And my assignment got to be Taiwan. So
So how long you been in the service at this point?
24,
Year and a half, maybe?
25 months, something, almost, yeah, about 2 years.
Yeah. And how much you have left?
Well, the way it worked out, I had just enough time for 2 more assignments. I wound up going to
So you had a
Taiwan.
4-year commitment.
Right.
And they don't usually send you overseas if you have something less than a year, do they?
No, I still
So
would
you
have had
still
8
had-
months after that
okay.
assignment, so.
So this new assignment is where?
Taichung Air Base in Taiwan.
I've never heard of that
It's
one.
halfway down the island. But,
You've just got it listed as Taiwan, okay?
yeah, it's in about the center of the island. It was up on a plateau and facing mainland China.
Mhm.
So on a clear day, you could see the coastline, you know, outline of fog, whatever. And then I read in the Stars and Stripes that they had the nuclear capability of launching a missile 120 miles. So I was telling everybody, hey, this is great. And they're saying, why? I said, we're only 90 miles offshore. Anyway, it was made a little point, but it was that it was humorous.
So where were you building this new?
It was on the base. There were buildings there, but they weren't finished, a lot of them. And there were only 300 people on the base. That included the 314th Troop Carrier Wing, I think, and 62 17th Combat Support Group that I was assigned to. And we were responsible for all incoming personnel, updating the records, financial personnel, anything else, and they had people from the hospital involved there too. But yeah, there were all the officers, NCOs, and enlisted men went to the same little club that's probably the size of this room. It's what, maybe 20 by 15, something like that. Then they had a patio. But at that time, a lot of the military protocols went out the window. We were more like friends, but we knew who was in charge and who was doing what. And then eventually it had to go back the other way, but that was a unique experience in itself, where you were more like friends than, you know, major, sergeant, you know, enlisted man. And by the time we left there, it was 13 months for the assignment. I had gone downtown the one time into Taichung, and I was walking down the street and they had this really large three-sided tent, and in the back is a TV, and all these Chinese are filling up this tent, and they're watching combat on TV. So it's dubbed in Chinese. So I'm standing back there watching them watching TV, and one of the little kids turned and saw me, so he wound up tapping his mother. Oh, yo, yo, yo. And all of a sudden, they all turned around, they're looking at me and bowing and waving. So I just waved, turned red, and walked away. But it was an interesting experience to see them watching combat, and then they're pointing at the TV like, you know, I was in my 1505s, the tan uniform, so they probably associated that a little more with the guys in the real warriors. And
How did they view you as sort of intruders in their land?
well, we had been forewarned to be on our best behavior, you know, saying that we were ambassadors basically for the United States of America. So most of us behaved ourselves. You always had somebody that didn't. And I threatened to beat one guy's butt for one night who was in the Air Force because he threatened to beat an old man who had made something for him, clothing-wise, I think. And this guy was drunk, and he wound up threatening the old man. So being a nice guy that I was, I threatened him. Told him my name, where I worked, and if he worked in personnel, you don't want to mess with anybody that worked in personnel because they can get your pay records to disappear, they can get you all kinds of problems. Well, you don't go out of your way to do it, but if you get somebody that's really nasty. So when I went back downtown again, I used to go to a couple of bars, have just a couple of drinks, never get, you know, sauce, but I couldn't buy a drink for the next week when I went downtown. They all knew who I was, and that's what really surprised me. They could tell you how much you got paid every month, or every 2 weeks like we did in the Air Force. But they had more knowledge of us than we did of them, I think. It's just amazing. We had a houseboys on base that would, you know, shine your shoes, get your clothes clean for you, do anything to make a little money. So the one.
So it was a good relationship that you were able to establish.
Yeah, and I always got along well with the people. I respected them, even though I'd see a lot of poor people living in cardboard shacks down by the river or something like that. When I was down by the river the one day, one woman was washing her clothes in the river. Another woman was getting drinking water out of the river, and another woman was dumping human fecal matter in the same river. And if it had been upstream instead of downstream, there weren't too many sanitary conditions while you were there.
What kind of activity at the base was going on there? Was this a repair type base, or was it a
No, it was basically a resupply base. We used to get a lot of our stuff in from the Navy, and but like I said, we had the 62 17th Combat Support Group, and you had the 314th Troop Carrier Wing. Well, when I flew over, I had a 3-day pass. The one time I went to Thailand, and when I flew on the C-130, they were offloading military weapons in Thailand. We had 5 bases. There was Ubon, Udorn, Karat, Tak Lee, and Don Mong down by Bangkok that we stopped at each one, and they were dropping off military supplies. So that's what they did. All we did was be there to support them. And
Did they ever finish those buildings that you spoke of?
yeah, eventually they were finishing them. They put us, we went from just a real short period of time, like a week or two, from those tents you had on MASH. So when I came home, I watched my first episode of MASH, I started laughing because we actually had those. Then they moved us into corrugated steel buildings that were H-shaped with your sinks and toilets and showers and everything in the middle, and the sleeping areas on the outside. Well, what they did, they left the eaves open. And it got cold in the wintertime when you got the wind blowing in off the street. So they brought out two old, what do you call those things? Like oil heaters. The one blew a hole in the one wall on the other side, and the second one started on fire. So we're back to freezing again in the winter. We were the only ones, the enlisted people didn't have heating in their barracks, and the sergeants and the officers did, but they tried to accommodate us, or kill us, one of the two, I don't remember which. But it was funny.
Is the weather pretty much the same as you would experience back here in the States?
No.
Michigan?
Some of it is. Summertime weather was nice. I think in the spring we got some monsoons, and when that water hits you, you could feel it. You had to wear a rubber poncho, basically, to stay dry. And when I get to work, I take off the poncho, my clothes were soaked from sweat. And in the winter, like I said, the most of the time was decent, you know, but when you had the monsoons, they come in hard.
How long would they last?
Geez, I don't even know. It's probably a month or so, is what I'm thinking, because it's a long time ago that I went through this. But the cold weather, I used to sleep with my fatigues on, my field jacket on, my hat on, my boots on, and we only had 2 blankets. So I took a shot of cognac at night and a shot of cognac in the morning to wake up. I learned that trick from a staff sergeant. And at that time I was only a 2-striper. So, worked. Kept you warm going to sleep and warm waking up. Whatever works you try to do. But the one main thing that happened over there that I was surprised at, I was out on one of the main streets in Taichung, and Shanghai Shek came by, riding by in one of his big vehicles, and I was about 20 feet away. So I watched him go by, and you know, it's not every day you get to see a quote-unquote world leader. So
What was the purpose of his visit?
I never found out, never asked. I just asked the one guy that was standing next to me what was going on. It was one of the Chinese shopkeepers. That's where I was at talking to him. And he said that Shang was coming. I said, okay, let's stand here and watch. And I understand he died, I think, somewhere around 1975. And this would have been 1967, when I saw him. But, you know, it's not every day you get to see a world leader who's part of the history of China. So.
Did you have any relationships or friends that carried over that you made while you were there?
I got married after I got out of the service, and I had a list, a black book. Had a few girls' names in it, but I had most of my friends' names from the military. And that marriage lasted 6 months.
Pardon me?
Marriage lasted 6 months. During the meantime, she got rid of all my military stuff, and she'd taken my black book and thrown it away. So I couldn't keep in touch with anybody anymore. But I had for a little while.
Now, let's go back a minute. Before you entered the service, you had broken up with your girlfriend.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you got married.
Oh, no,
How
that
did
was,
that-
I got married after the service.
Oh, okay.
After I got
Okay,
out, but
okay.
that's when all my, names and numbers were in that black book.
You weren't
Of all
able
my
to keep-
buddies got thrown out.
Keep track. Mhm.
So, there wasn't any other way. I figured I could keep in
Mhm.
touch. So, went on my way, and most of us, I guess, didn't keep in touch.
How much aware
About me.
were you of what was going on in the Vietnam activity?
Oh, well,
you
that's
were
where I
there?
learned not to trust my politicians.
Uh-huh.
And I just began to feel like they were using a lot of people as pawns, you know? It's
What
not,
was your source of information?
well, it's things that you got from the news media for the most part, and people that I talked to who had been in Vietnam. Some of them would come to Taiwan for R&R, and we'd hook up and talk, you know, and hang out, but most of them were Army guys.
Now, where would these people be who would want to come to Taiwan for the R&R? On the battlefront, more likely?
Well, for some reason, they got time to get out of there. I don't know whether it was, never really got into it that much, but I think they earned so much R&R time, and they were using it.
Mhm.
Some people went to Japan, some came to Taiwan, some went to Honolulu, some went to Bangkok, like I did. I took a 3-day pass. Well, actually, I took 3 days of leave. The major wouldn't give us a pass for 3 days, but on the other hand, he wanted us to extend for another 6 months. You know how many people did that?
Mhm.
If he'd have given people a 3-day pass instead of making them take leave time, I'm quite sure there would have been several people that would have stayed. But it was around Christmas time, and most guys wanted to get home.
Mhm.
But he didn't get anybody to stay. I can't understand why. Oh.
So this was your final hookup was in Taiwan
And
before
then
you came home?
Yeah, before I came home for Christmas, I got home December 24th at about 2 o'clock in the morning. So I woke my mom up, I woke my dad up, I woke the dog up. They're all standing there at the door bleary-eyed, and the first one to get happy to see me was the dog, naturally. So she was a mutt. I missed her the most, I think, of everybody. And she ran from halfway across the room, knocked me back into a chair, put her head under my chin and went, then my mom and dad came around and talked to me.
What was the food like?
For the Air Force, it was pretty good. The only bad meal we had was back in Keesler. On Thanksgiving, there were maggots in the gravy. And I happened to catch it before anybody else. I don't know how it happened,
Good
but that's a
gravy.
meal you don't want to eat too often. You know? So that was the only bad meal. All the rest of the time, food was good in the Air Force.
What about Taiwan?
Food was good there too. We had powdered milk. So after a year of that, you wanted to get a hold of a real. When I came back, I hit Seattle. I wanted 3 things. I wanted to see a round eye in a mini skirt, and I wanted a gallon of milk and a large pizza, all to eat myself. Those were the 3 things I wanted. Most of the time we had.
When you're
good
in
food.
Taiwan, do you eat the food that's there, or is all that stuff shipped in from?
Our food, I think they used to get some of the meat from the locals, but on the other hand, they had a veterinarian there that was checking everything. You couldn't eat downtown, couldn't drink downtown, outside a bottled beer from, outside somewhere else. But the ice cubes and everything would give you
Dysentery?
dysentery and a few other things, yeah. But they
Yeah,
told you
that's
not to
pretty
eat the
standard.
food.
They
Yeah,
tell you don't eat anything that wasn't sealed up.
pretty much. We got most of our stuff, I supply.
You don't even
from the
want
Navy.
a whiskey because it can be unsealed and something added to it, but anything in a can or anything like bottled beer
Yep.
that was sealed, it was okay, and sometimes that didn't seem to help.
I tried some Plum liquor one day and was plumb out of luck for 3 days.
Yeah.
I was in the head.
But when you just listen to what you've said, their regard for that kind of safety is
Yeah,
just non-existent.
no, it's a whole different world when you're overseas.
Even the stuff that's planted is, you know, the fertilizer is not from the standard places we would be getting it here, and
No,
trying to stay away from that is really hard.
well, the same thing with like I told you, the drinking water came out of the river.
Yeah, boy.
And
Well, what did you do for water then? You've got a big water desalination and purification device? Or?
yeah, they had it on the base
Mhm.
pretty much, so
Yeah.
that you didn't have to worry about that stuff.
Imagine the taste of it wasn't exactly the best either because of all the treatment they put in it.
It wasn't bad.
No?
You didn't really notice it a lot. The only bad thing was taking a shower in the wintertime. Didn't have any hot water.
Oh, gee.
So the showers were kept at a minimal.
Now, why would they have any?
This was in the beginning, when we first got there. They were still implementing everything. And they had a base theater they built later while I was over in Taiwan. They had a full chapel thing set up for the people who wanted to go to it. And eventually they had an officers, NCOs, and separate enlistment, enlisted men's club. So then you only got 3-2 beer anyway, so.
Yeah. Whatever they can ship
Yeah.
in.
Well, they don't want you getting drunken out of hand, you know. So.
Did you ever have the feeling that you might get shipped to a battlefront area?
Well, the only time that happened was when I was getting out. That was my last base, when I was at Webb Air Force Base, Texas, out in Big Spring, Texas. And they were trying to talk me into re-enlisting. And I was finding out, I had an expert marksmanship rating from the day I came in, first time I qualified. And the guy was trying to get me to re-enlist. I'd already heard that people who had expert marksmanship ratings in the Air Force were sometimes being assigned to the Army in Vietnam on guard duty. By that time, I was already ready to get out, and I figured 4 years was enough. I wasn't completely a military type oriented person. I did what they wanted for the most part. I stood up for us when the times were, where there was a time to do it for the individuals, you know, for the people in the Air Force. And there was a number of occasions I did that. And didn't really get in trouble for it because I knew what I was doing. But on the other hand, it's one of those things that you don't give up all your rights. Most of them are gone. You know, you have to do what they want you to do, but.
Let's go back a bit. You made a comment first off about not knowing what you wanted to do, which is classic for kids like that coming out of high school.
Sure.
And kind of restless, not really sure. What happened between that time frame where you felt this, who am I, where am I going,
Right.
to what I'm now hearing is somebody who seemed to get along, know how to function in the service, know what was required and stay out of trouble, and you seem to have grabbed a hold of yourself and kind of got yourself socialized back into the world and seem like you know where you're going. What happened? Where did that happen, or you even know?
Well, I was already like I told you, feeling like I owed the country for something, for living here. And that's what drove me, when I finally evaluated everything, to put me into the decision-making process why I joined the Air Force. But on the other hand, the longer I was in, the more I decided military life wasn't for me, I wanted to become a civilian, go back to school, finish, and live out my life as a civilian. But it was just, I think, at that one point, the military experience wasn't bad. I'd already had discipline playing football in high school. I'd been in the Boy Scouts and things like that. And you have the organization, the uniforms, whatever that goes along with it.
Discipline.
So I had already pretty much got that down pat. The discipline was already there to a degree. But I think when I got out of the service, I was a little more mature. And
A certain amount of patriotism may have been responsible for
yeah,
the conversion.
but I think that was a sign of the times back in the 50s and 60s. You had World War II, and that was unavoidable. And for that reason, you felt like there were a lot of people who were patriotic.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, as you see how politicians maneuver, it does sort of take away a little bit of that patriotism. But you're not there for the politicians, you're there for the country
Mm-hmm.
and the people in it. So,
How were you affected, if at all, by the reaction of a lot of people in the U.S. in their opposition to the Vietnam War? Did you see that much? Did
yeah,
you feel it?
I could understand it. Like I said, Jane Fonda carried things too far. But on the other hand, I could see peaceful demonstrations, but and at the same time, you can see the conservative and the liberal separation, you know, and people wanting to end the war and the way it was going. It didn't really seem like we were out there to win a war.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where that came up. I empathized with the people who were protesting, but at the same time, I had my own feelings. So,
What kind of entertainment was available when you were over in Taiwan?
well, we used to get the football games on tape. They'd come a week after the game had been played. So we got to watch it, but we already knew what the score was. Lions lose again. So it was.
You mean they were still losing way back
Oh
then?
yeah, they played Minnesota in a 10-10 tie. That was one of the good games that they sent to us, and we already knew what the outcome was, but I can't even remember who the players were. We sit out on the patio at night and watch the videotape of the game. Stars and Stripes is where you got most of your news, or from people in general
Mm-hmm.
who are passing through.
Mhm.
And
Did you ever have one of those traveling?
they had trips that you could take. I
Uh-huh.
take that back. Almost forgot about that. I'd gone to Sun Moon Lake on a bus. And you're traveling on the road past all these fields that have been fertilized with bull manure or something, you know, or water buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you a strange odor in the summertime. So we went all the way up with the windows down on the bus because it was so hot. And Sun Moon Lake was one of the most beautiful places they had around, you know. And there was another place you could take a trip that, I can't remember the name of it now, but it was a gorge where they had the marble,
Mm-hmm.
and they were mining that to sell.
Mm-hmm.
So it was some really nice things to do, but we didn't have a lot of time. I was working 12 to 16 hours a day for quite a while trying to get part of the base put together on my end of things,
Mhm.
you know, so. And we had records coming in quick ahead of people, so.
Did any of these traveling stars that would come in, singing groups and Bob Hope and all that stuff?
Yeah, Bob Hope wasn't coming there. He was going to Vietnam. But they had a lot of Orientals come through. I remember they had a group from the Philippines, and they were pretty good. Then they had their local talent, you know, but I don't remember anyone major coming through.
Mm-hmm. Well, that wasn't a battle zone, and
No, it wasn't one that
You know.
they should have been coming to, you know, it's just, one of those, it was,
there weren't that many, and the ones that did go got the big spots that
yeah.
always had.
The people that were under fire are the ones who should have gotten the entertainment, gotten breaks, you know, they're the ones that are under pressure all the time. I did, on the flight over to Thailand, when I was on Taiwan, the pilot did mention that to look out the left side of the aircraft, and there was a firefight going on at Tui Wa. And we did that. Oh, you couldn't see anything. We were at 10,000 feet. The lights were out on the plane, the C-130, and all you could see were flares and tracer bullets and no sound. And that was an eerie thing to see. It was strange. I slept on a bed of rockets while I was on the plane. The guy says, "What are you doing sleeping on a bed of rockets?" What's going to happen? They get you 2 miles straight up, lights out, be lights out anyway. So, and it was the most comfortable place because we'd been sitting on the metal seats that they had welded to the wall of the C-130. It's more comfortable sleeping on the wooden crate.
So you disembarked from Taiwan?
I came back from Taiwan, I came home for Christmas that year, and then I went back to Webb Air Force Base in Big Spring, Texas.
And you'd have something less than a year left?
I had about 8 months left to go. So
you just pick up your same routine to jump in what's going on?
Well, when I got to Webb, they needed help in career motivation, airman's records. I helped out in those two, a little bit in officer's records. Then they had a staff sergeant who wanted to go to Korea, TDY, for 90 days. And I'd already been around long enough, I'm telling them, don't go. He's got a wife and kids at home. I said, when you get there, they're going to keep you. What did they do? They kept him. So I wound up doing his job too. He was an admin clerk. And I had to cut orders and things like that. I had to cut an order to promote a Colonel McLaughlin to general. And the colonel came in the one day and he was ticked off because the order was dated 2 weeks later than when he thought he should have been promoted. That was one of those things that I had to tell him, sorry, sir. And he had just screwed over 2 MP friends of mine, air police friends of mine, so I wasn't too upset for him anyway. But yeah, that was my biggie there, I think. Other than going up on the hills and watching the sunset, the rattlesnakes come out, and the tumbleweed blow by out in West Texas, you know, there were things to do. You could travel if you had a car.
Had to be better than Taiwan, though.
But I didn't freeze.
Yeah.
It was a little warm, but I didn't freeze. That was the bad part in Taiwan, was being cold.
So what was it like coming back home?
Felt strange, but it didn't take long to sort of blend in again. I just wanted to be a human being without somebody telling me what to do. That's the one thing I think they're great, especially, I didn't mind taking orders if it was somebody knew what they were doing. And I had 2 officers while I was in there, I'd have followed into hell. And I had some of them I wouldn't have followed to the drinking fountain because I figured they'd get lost along the way, you know. So you have the people you respect and the people that you may not, but you still have to do what you want, what they want you to do. So I figured if somebody's going to screw up my life, I want to do it myself. That's why I got out.
So what's your plan of action now? You're
I'm retired now.
No, but at that time,
Oh, at that
what was
time?
your plan of action to get yourself back into society?
Well, I had already taken 2 classes out at the junior college when I was at Webb. One was a creative writing class, and I aced that, and I had a personnel management class that I aced. So I started getting ready to go back to school, so when I came back here, I tried to get back into it again, and I used the GI Bill to do that. Then I ran into a girl, thought I'd get married, and sort of screwed things up after that, but you know, like I said, it's up to me to screw it up, not the military.
Did you stay in college to finish, or?
Well, I went to Oakland, went back to Oakland, and I did a lot better. I was getting A's and B's, and once in a while when they screwed around my schedule, I worked for Chrysler for 34 years. And between Chrysler almost going out of business in the 80s, the early 80s, and the divorce I got then, yeah, it slowed me down big time. So I kept going I came within 3 classes of getting my bachelor's degree.
Oh, good.
But that's why I ordered the ring. And I figured I'm not letting it go to waste, so I usually wear that as a reminder I should have gone back and stayed in school.
Weren't there classes that could be held right on the plant site?
Not for the school that I wanted to go to.
No.
That was Oakland. I had to drive out there 3 times a week, and that was about 40 minutes each way. And you didn't have the computers to take classes with at that time. So it's I'm glad I served and put in my time. I organized a group to run against corrupt union officials, and one of the deciding factors that bothered me was the fact that none of them had put in time in the military.
Mm-hmm.
What did they get? What did they put in to ensure the well-being of everybody else in this country? And yet they're going to try to tell you how things are.
For sure.
It's not just a statement. We had our local burn the day before an international audit, and the next day the audit was due. All the financial records had burned up. So you can see where the military part did affect the rest of my life, because we weren't going to take crap from anybody anymore. You know, it gets to the point where you have some leadership skills that you develop, whether you use them or not, between the school and the military. I got fed up and did something about it. Organized an entire group trying to run it.
How did you get involved with Chrysler?
A trial and error. I wound up coming out. I worked for Metropolitan Life as a debit agent, going door to door for a while. I wound up working for Burger King as a night manager for about a year, and told to take that job and shove it, which is one of the things everybody wants to do. And then I happened to go to MESC, and they had a program where they were placing veterans in different places, so they sent me out for the interview, and I got the job working in material department.
Material.
Yeah. So at first, we were putting stock on the line manually, and then I wound up becoming a high-low driver, forklift operator, whatever anybody wants to call it. So most of that time, that's what I did.
Did you enjoy that work?
Well, didn't dislike it too much. It was a way to provide a living for my family.
Sure.
At the time, give me a chance to use some of the benefits there for going back to school, and then it just got, all of it got to be too much.
Yeah.
You know, it became difficult. But I don't regret any time I spent in the military. Had a lot of fun sometimes.
So how big is your family?
Well, my dad died in 2003. He had spent time in the jungles of Okinawa in the Philippines. And now it's just my mom, my brother, and myself, and my two daughters, granddaughter, grandson, and then on the other side, my kids are 15 and 17, my grandkids. My other grandson is 3.5 months old on my other daughter's side, so that's about it.
Do your daughters live around here?
Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was, except when I was in the military and traveling. But, yeah, we were a fairly close family. Weren't many, so.
So how many grandchildren?
Three now, yeah. 15, 17, and 3.5 months.
Wow. Getting close to being a great-grandfather.
Well, I'm not going to be able to see him grow up, I'm afraid. But on the other hand, it all depends.
Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about your career?
No? You say no?
You spoke about the awards. You mentioned the marksman, expert marksman.
Yeah, when I got out, I had, God, I can't remember exactly what they were. There were times I laughed about it because I got a good conduct medal, and there were some incidents where a couple of sergeants wouldn't like to see me get a good conduct medal. But I got...
But staying out of trouble usually can get you that, can it?
You have to stay out of trouble to get it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was in trouble because they wanted to put me in trouble, and I was up for 2 Article 15s and a general court-martial and beat them all. The general court-martial, when I was over in Taiwan, they gave us a house mother who was a tech sergeant, and I was working 12, 16 hours a day. Like I told you, tried to set up a system for our base. And the one house mother sergeant came down and told me to turn out a light because it was about 11, 12 o'clock at night. And it wasn't bothering anybody else in the barracks. Nobody. And I was writing a letter home to my parents. He told me to turn out the light, and being nice, compliant person I was, I said, "In a minute, Sarge." I said, "Turn it out now," and I told him the same thing I told him before. Went, got the air police, they came and picked me up. I was already done writing the letter home. And they took me to the air police shack and woke the first sergeant out of bed, brought him down. He's reading me the riot act. They're all telling me to be in the day room at 7 o'clock in the morning. So we go back in there, and the captain and I came in pretty close at the same time, who was in charge of our squadron. So they're all reading me the riot act. The house mother sergeant, the first sergeant, then the captain's sitting there with his head in his hands, and he says, "Airman Probert, do you have anything to say for yourself?" I said, "Yes, sir. I was writing a letter home to my parents after working a 12 or 16-hour day." He said, "Go back to work." That was the thing that PACAF was hot on, was writing, keeping in touch with your parents and family. But nobody asked me what I was doing.
No.
You wasn't willing to give me the time, so I took the time. So you can be very careful what you're doing, and sometimes even when you get angry, you're right.
Yeah.
You know, so.
And the National Defense Service medal, that's just from being there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically being in that area at that time. The Outstanding Unit Award that I got for being there was not something that everybody gets.
Mm-hmm.
You basically have to be there in the beginning when everything is starting, and it has to become an outstanding unit to get the award, basically.
Mm-hmm. Anybody have any questions they'd like to, anything else you think we'd like to hear?
I don't think so, because my mom's shaking her head. She wants to get out of here.
Yes.
She hasn't had breakfast yet.
How about you, Mom?
Too much, too much, too much.
Too much, huh?
very interesting, but too much, and pretty soon I'm gonna be like this.
Well, Stewart, thank you very much for giving us the
Appreciate the opportunity.
information, and thank you for your service.
Well, it's, you know, there's still a lot of people out there that feel the way I did back then. I still feel that way to a degree, but it's been tempered by the politicians, you know. You just, I don't know that I'd want the military to have complete control, because then you could have a totalitarian form, you know, of government, but I would like to see some, keep people's noses out of certain things.
Are you any relation to our good friend Robert?
Bob?
Mm-hmm.
No, I met him twice. Bob Probert played for the Red Wings, you remember him.
Oh, yeah.
And I met him once out at Oakland University,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I met him again downtown when he was signing autographs for the Ambassadors hockey team down there. Matter of fact, I had him sign a birthday card for each of my kids. One was in December, one in January. It was right in between, so he signed the birthday card. His girlfriend, who I think became his wife, it looks like her, I saw a picture of her in the paper,
Yeah.
who was there at the time and thought that was the cutest thing going, you know, getting signed autographs for my kids. Because their last name, they were little players still,
Uh-huh.
young. But, yeah, it was a shame to see him die at 45, was it?
Right around there, yeah.
Hell of a hockey player.
Yeah, for sure.
Not just fighter, but he was a hell of a hockey player.
Well, he was a fighter who just happened to be
Hockey player, yeah. Well, that's what
and a
they,
pretty good one at that.
people used to ask me if we were related. I said, only in attitude.
Yeah. I took my granddaughter down to Gibraltar, I don't remember, back during the day when he was playing,
Yeah.
and I got a picture of him holding her up. I'll never forget that. She didn't know what was going on. She was only 5 or 6, and he just happened to take a liking to her, and he lifted her up, and
Yeah, when I was out at Oakland, I threw my driver's license on the table. We had one of those tables like you've got over here, or this one. And he said, what do you want me to do, sign this on the back? I said, I want you to look at it. And he says, I'll be damned, we might be related. I said, only if your people came from Wales. And I think we better end this, and I gotta get out of here.
okay.
I appreciate
Thank you,
your
sir.
time, enjoyed it.